Welcome to my demonstration of my MATLAB project. I've decided to make a version of Blackjack. We start our game by calling our initialization function. This function prompts the user as to whether they want to view the rules or not before they begin a game. It also gets their input on the balance that they have at the beginning of each game. The main thing this function does, though, is initialize a number of different variables that will be important in later functions throughout the program, hence the name initialization. Then we use a while loop to check for that player balance, and if it is greater than 0, then we continue with the rest of the program. If it isn't greater than 0, then we skip to our final outputs, which we'll talk about later. So the first function that is called when the player balance is greater than 0 is the shuffle deck function. This function generates an array of 52 non-repeated integers from 1 to 52. This imitates a shuffle 52 card deck, and this is achieved using the randperm function. The next function we call is the player bet function. This function prompts the user to enter a bet and determines whether or not that bet is valid. So we define a valid bet as a bet that is less than our player balance and is greater than 0. We use a while loop to check for a correct bet, and while it is not correct, we keep prompting the user to enter a valid bet until they do. Now we call the add card function. This function is extremely important to our game because it can add one card to any length hand for either the player or the dealer. So we initially use this function to add 2 cards to the player's hand and 2 cards to the dealer's hand. One thing to note is that every time this function is called, it sets the current card as the current card plus 1. So this is to make sure that no card is pulled twice out of the deck. It's also important to note that in our shuffle deck function, if the current card is greater than or equal to 48, then this function is called again to make sure that we don't go past the limit of our array, which is 52. You'll see that later in the code. Then we use our card finder function, which converts that value of 1 through any number to 52 to an actual card. So we use this using the card finder function. This function iterates through any hand, so player or dealer, and uses that number and assigns a suit and a number based on its position, or a face value based on its position. This is done using a number of different if and else if statements. We can see that values according to 1 are aces, so 1, 14, 27, 40, and all values linked to face values, so 10, king, queen, and jack are all worth 10. We skip over having that outputted to our user just for the sake of simplicity. And you'll see that in the current status function. Once we've done this for the player, we also do the same thing for the dealer. Then we call our ace conversion function to convert any aces to 11s. This function is also really important, and it uses a number of different if statements to check whether or not it should convert to an ace. So the rules that has been set are as follows. If an ace is in an hand and it is the first or second card in that hand, and there is not another ace in that hand, it will be converted to 11. So if a hand has an ace in it and a second card that isn't an ace, that ace will be converted to an 11. If the first card is a normal card and the second card is an ace, the second card will be converted to 11. If both cards are aces, then only the first will be converted to 11. This is to make sure that the sum can't go past 21. And we have this if I is less than 3 to make sure that cards, aces that are in the third or more most position in a hand cannot be converted into aces. This is a limit to the program actually, but it's important to have it like this to make it easier to edit for future additions to the program and to make it easier for the player to play. Once we've converted aces, we now have a true version of both the player and the dealer's hands, so we can call our current status function. This is a really important function as well, and it is called differently based on a number of different Boolean variables. Right now, it's not important to know about those Boolean variables, so we just get into the function itself. So we'll check if the final output is false, which it isn't because this isn't the final output, and it'll output the dealer's and the player's hand according to what their hand is. If there's an ace of whatever suit will be outputted. If it's not an ace, then that number will be outputted. It also checks if it's the first time that this function is called, if it is the first time, or if this function is being called during the player's choice loop, then the dealer's hand will only be shown, or only the second card will be shown of the dealer's hand. This is following just the rules of Blackjack. Now we collate our player choice functions. We call our player choice function. This function prompts the user for a choice and decides whether it's valid or not. This is really, really similar to our player bet function. It prompts the user for a choice, determines whether it's valid or not. If it's not, asks them again. If it is, then it sets the choice as what they said. This is important. This function is used to either add a card to a player's hand or keep their hand as it is. So if their choice is hit, which is add a card, the same set of functions are called as here. So we add a card, we convert the card into an actual card, and then we convert the aces if applicable. And then we output them again. And this will continue until either the player's sum of the hand is greater than 21, and if that happens, we break the while loop. We break the loop so that the player doesn't have to enter a choice again, and it'll just skip the rest of the functions and output that they lost. If it is less than 21 and the player chooses to stand, the while loop stops, and we continue with the rest of the program. So if the player's sum is less than or equal to 21, we call the same functions again. So add card, card finder, ace conversion, and current status, but for the dealer this time. And basically this uses the same principle, but instead of having a while loop that checks for the player's choice, we have an if statement that checks, we do have a while statement that checks for the dealer's hand, the sum of the dealer's hand, and we check if it's less than or equal to 16. So as long as the dealer's hand is less than or equal to 16, we keep calling these functions. This is just another rule of Blackjack. We can increase or decrease this number to make it easier or harder, respectively. Once all of the adding of cards has been finished, we call our win calculator function. This function checks for the current status of the player in the dealer's hands and outputs the winnings accordingly. So we can see that it checks for their sum. So if the sum of the player's hand is greater than 21, then we display that they busted and that the dealer wins. If the sum of the dealer's hand is greater than 21, then we display that the player wins. If the sum of the player's hand is greater than the dealer's hand, then we also display that they win. If the sum of the player's hand is exactly equal to 21, we tell them that they get blackjack. And so for each of these scenarios, we have a different betting system. So if we win, we get 2 times the bet. If we lose, we don't get any money back. If we get blackjack, we get 2.5 times the bet. And we also have a tie scenario. If it's a tie, then we get money back equal to the bet. And then we just output balance after the betting system is finished, and we set our high score as that balance. We also reinitialize some variables because if this isn't the last time the program is run, then everything else will be appended onto the previous game's variables, which is bad. Okay, and we'll continue this while loop until the player's balance is less than 1. Once the player reaches a balance of 0, we finish the game and we output our final status. So if we go back here, we can see that we used a Boolean to determine which of these should be outputted. So because our final output is true now, we skip over this entire part of the function and we come right here and we say, we tell the player that they're broke, we tell them the balance, and we also create a plotted graph that shows their balance over time. Okay, so that concludes the overview of the different functions of the program. Now we'll get into a live demo of the program. So we'll call the function. So it'll ask us, do we want to view the rules? Let's just say yes. Y, enter. It'll show us the rules. And it'll ask us how much money do we have. So let's say 100. We can test the player bet function to see if it's working or not. So if we put in a bet higher, 550, it'll prompt us to enter a valid bet. We can try with a negative number, 100, negative 100, and it'll tell us to enter a valid bet. So let's put in a valid bet now, 50. Okay, so we can see that the dealer drew an unknown card as expected and a 5 of diamonds, and we've drawn a 10 of hearts, a 10 of spades, and a 9 of hearts. So our player count is 19. So in this scenario, the player should stand because it's a higher chance that we draw a card greater than 2, which will put our sum over 21, which is what we don't want. So we'll stand. Okay, it looks like we had a higher count than our dealer. So the dealer drew a 3 of hearts, 3 of hearts and a 5 of diamonds, which is less than 16, so they'll draw again. Then they draw a 7 of clubs, so the total sum is 15, which is again less than 16, so they draw again, and they pull a 10 of diamonds, which means they bust, and we win regardless. So we can bet again, 50. So they drew an 8 of diamonds and an 9 card, and we drew a 10 of clubs and a 3 of diamonds, so our count is 13. We can also test to see if this hit or stand function works. So let's put in something that isn't hit or stand. Let's say double. And it'll tell us to enter a valid choice. Or maybe bid split. Enter a valid choice. Those are real terms used in Blackjack but aren't part of this program because they're too complex given the scope of it. So let's put in hit this time because there's a greater chance we pull a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rather than a 9 or a 10 or a king or a queen or a jack. Okay, so we ended up drawing a 3 of diamonds, a 10 of clubs, and a 10 of spades, which means we bust and the dealer wins. So let's continue our game. Let's go a bit higher this time. Feeling a bit lucky. Okay, so the dealer drew an ace of diamonds, which means they have 11 and something else. So it's highly likely that the dealer will win this game. So so we should try and hit to see if we can get as close to 21 as possible. Okay, so we draw a 10 of hearts, which means we bust and the dealer wins again. And so our balance goes down to 250. So let's go again. Let's try 250 again. We go all in this time. Okay, so the dealer drew an unknown card and a 4 of clubs. And we drew a 10 of clubs and a 10 of hearts, which means our count is 20, which is really good. So let's stand. And we win. The dealer busted, drew 23, and we kept our count of 20. Let's go again, 500. So we have a count of 18 this time, so we'll stand. And this time it's a tie, so we get our money back equal to what we bet. Let's try 500 again. 9. Let's try hitting. 18. Let's try standing. And we won, so our balance goes up to 1,000. Let's try again. 1,000. Play account 12. Hit. 18. Okay, let's stand on this. And we win again. Okay, so let's go to 2,000 this time. So the dealer drew 10 of hearts, we drew 17, so I think we should stand in this scenario. And we're broke, we lost, because we went all in and we lost all our money. Okay, so we can see that the final output, the current status with the final output boolean as true, that puts the current status correctly, and it tells us we're broke, and it also outputs this this graph showing us a balance over time. So we started off normal, and then we increased our bet, we went up heaps, and then we lost all of it in 2 games. Okay, so this concludes the live demo of my, or the demonstration of my Blackjack game. Thank you for watching.